Welcome to Film and Page. I'm Dominic. So, there's been a rumor floating around the internet, and this rumor kind of got me thinking that there's a rumor going around that Netflix might buy out Paramount and CBS, and Viacom, and all that. And then that way, Netflix will have control of Star Trek. So I don't exactly know why this triggered this in my mind, but when I heard that news, it made me search up how long will it be before Star Trek the original series goes into the public domain and anyone can have access to it. And I think the date I found was sometime after 2060. So the show will almost be 100 years old by the time it falls into the public domain. And I thought, man, that's a really long time for one company to have a copyright. Like, is that a good thing? Like, is that really good for a company to have the rights to something, that long? 100 years, almost a whole century. And at that point, when it goes into the public domain, like, how many people are going to even care about the original series? And will anyone even care about Star Trek in general at that point? So it's interesting. So I came across two articles, and they're like the complete opposite of each other, which I thought was interesting. So I'm gonna talk about them in separate videos. So the first one I'm gonna talk about is this one that is pro copyright. It is all for copyright and long copyright periods. Where the other article I'm gonna be looking at and talking about is the opposite of this one. So here's the article. Star Wars and Mickey Mouse, how copyright scarcity helped create two iconic franchises. This fall sees the return of Star Wars to the big screen and begins a new era of stories with Star Wars The Force Awakens. So this is an older article. This is from 2015, before The Force Awakens hit theaters. Star Wars is truly a cultural phenomenon, so much so that the release of trailers for the movie became internet events and are dissected scene by fans trying to learn every shred of information that they can. Not bad for a film that cost $11 million to make, but generated a franchise the Walt Disney Company paid $4 billion to acquire. The first three movies have grossed a combined $1.8 billion, and the Star Wars universe is said to have 17,000 characters inhabiting several thousand planets over a span of 20,000 years. And it almost didn't happen at all, because George Lucas' first plan was to remake Flash Gordon, according to Star Wars producer Gary Kurtz. We tried to buy the rights to Flash Gordon from King Features in 1971. They weren't adverse to discussing it, but their restrictions were so draconian that we realized right away that it wasn't really a great prospect at the time. So this is a story I've heard before. This is something that was covered in pretty good detail in the book, The Secret History of Star Wars. And if you want to know a lot about like how the creative process of how George Lucas's mind works, man, that's a really, really good book. Definitely read that one. And that goes into detail about this thing. So that's the first time I ever heard it. But but George Lucas has even admitted this a lot of times, that Star Wars was influenced by Flash Gordon. And that was basically what led him to start to want to create Star Wars, as he couldn't get his hands on the Flash Gordon franchise or the copyright for that character. By that time, the first Flash Gordon serials would have been 35 years old and already in its renewal term of copyright protection. This is where those who call for drastically shorter copyright terms, as short as 14 years, are missing the point. Those who wish to shorten copyright terms focus exclusively on the monetary reward that an author receives for their exclusive rights as their sole incentive to create. Since most copyright works soon exhaust their financial rewards, the argument goes that long copyright terms amount to perpetual copyright and do not spur the creation of new works. In reality, the benefit of long copyright terms is that certain stories and characters stay off limits for an extended period of time, forcing you to create something new. This is the other side of copyright that never gets mentioned. The long copyright term forces the creation of new works, since uncreative rehashing and retelling old works is not permitted, because copyright scarcity exists The creation of new works is clearly a public benefit that promotes the progress of useful arts, as required by enabling clause of Article 1, Section 8. So if Flash Gordon had gone into the public domain, Star Wars would never have existed. Would Lucas Flash Gordon have been a good movie? All signs point to yes. But it would not have been the cultural phenomenon that Star Wars became. Ask yourself a question. Which would you rather have? A good remake of Flash Gordon or Star Wars and everything that goes with it? And that is not the first time that has happened. So the other half of the article I'm not going to get into because it's just taking the same argument again, repeating it, but this time with Walt Disney and how he couldn't keep the rights to Lucky Rabbit and that forced him to create Mickey Mouse. Now, one thing I find it's a little bit ironic with this article is it talks about how because George Lucas couldn't get Flash Gordon, we got Star Wars. And but then also goes on to talk about how Disney bought Star Wars for $4 billion because they can't think of anything new. They wanted something that was already, had a fan base. There's a reason why they bought it, because it had a built-in fan base. It was a proven, asset. So that's the interesting part about this article. And in the one paragraph, I'm going to go back down to this one paragraph here. How people say there's no incentive to create new things if all this stuff falls into, because people could just keep rehashing it over and over again. But that's what's happening now anyway. There's not really anything new being created. Not like there is no more like big franchises like Star Wars. Like that hasn't happened. Like, when was the last time there was a really big movie that impacted like The Matrix, maybe? Like the MCU, but the MCU, even that's based on something that's pre-existing, right? The Marvel comic books, which have been around forever. And even superhero movies aren't anything new. So I don't really see the argument here. To me, this argument the author of this article is making doesn't really hold water for me, because I don't really see big movie studios doing this. Because all I see are big movie studios trying to buy up whatever franchise or whatever property they can that's already got a built-in fan base, so they can basically strip mine it. That's what Disney did with Star Wars. They just did the same thing George Lucas tried to do with Flash Gordon back in the 70s. They bought Star Wars so they can almost like reinvent it, and they can make their version of Star Wars and reboot it. Now, I'm a little split on this whole thing with the copyright issue. On the one hand, I like the idea that you got one company or one creative force that kind of controls the kind of keep everything streamlined, so you can got one consistent version of the property going on. Where if it was in the public domain, anyone can make a Star Wars movie, so it would start to get diluted, and then what is canon? Each one of these movies would be their own self-contained canon. It wouldn't be one big long canon. So I kind of see it from that point of view, but now from the other point of view, I think the people who are running Star Wars right now at Disney, are they the best people, honestly, to be running this franchise? I know there's fans of these new Disney Star Wars movies, but do you really get the sense when you see them in interviews and you see the decisions they're making and you see the people they're hiring? Do these people actually love Star Wars? I don't really think they do. Like, are these really the best people to be handling this? Like, if it was in the public domain, people who truly, really loved the films could make like a really good, you would end up getting probably some really good Star Wars movies that you're not getting now because Disney owns it all, lock, stock, and barrel. Well, like a good example I can think of is, say, Count Dracula and Frankenstein. They've been in the public domain forever. Universal made that Frankenstein movie, and it was a huge hit back in the day. That was a very big hit. That was like the Star Wars of its day, that movie. And, they basically ran that into the ground over the years by making all these, like, stupid sequels to it. But, those characters are in the public domain, so anyone could, make a Dracula movie or a Frankenstein movie. The only things Universal actually had copyrighted is the look of Frankenstein and Dracula, their Universal look. But you know, anyone can make that kind of a make a Dracula movie or Frankenstein movie. So if they had control of that, like Disney has control of Star Wars, we would have gotten the Universal films, which were good, but as time went on, they got worse and worse and worse, just like what's happening with the Star Wars movies. But then we wouldn't have got all those really cool Hammer horror, you know, films with Christopher Lee and all those guys, you know, making all those, you know, crazy Dracula and Frankenstein adaptations. And, you know, there's a lot of that we wouldn't have gotten. So what kind of Star Wars movies would we have gotten if Star Wars had fallen into the public domain? And we probably would have gotten something better than what Disney is churning out. So like there's two sides of that argument. I kind of see two sides. And now the other argument is like almost a century. Is that long enough? Is that, you know, enough? Is that too long for a company to have complete control of a franchise that long? And the only reason it is that long is because these big, huge companies like Walt Disney, they lobbied to get it extended because they're about to lose Mickey Mouse. Because I think it used to be like 50 years. After 50 years, you know, the character would fall into the public domain. Like if they never lobbied the laws, like a lot of characters, like Superman would already be in public domain. Batman would already be in there. You know, Star Trek, I think Star Trek's over 50 years old now, so that'll probably be into the public domain. So it'll be a very, very different landscape. And the other thing then, if these companies can't hold on to these things, then they would be forced to make up something original. They'd be forced to. So I think, this one I don't agree with. Like I'm kind of split, but I'm more like disagreeing with this article. So now the next video I'm going to go into the second article, which is, you know, the opposite of this one. It goes through the upsides of having these like slacker copyright laws or, you know, shortening copyright terms. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. I'd like to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I appreciate you all in helping this channel grow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded.